Scotland Yard's drafted in officers from outside of London to help to deal with climate change protests. More than 750 people have been arrested since the demonstrations began last Monday. And Sky's Inzamam Rashid is in Oxford Circus for us this afternoon. Inzamam, I believe police have been trying to move people on from Oxford Circus during the course of the afternoon. How's that been going?
That's right, Isabel. We are moving now away from Oxford Circus towards Marble Arch. The last person who was chained to the ground was actually quite a heavily pregnant woman as well, and she was lifted by police officers, taken away after she was cut out on what was her kind of arm lock that she had in place. Now, here at Oxford Circus, we're just leaving because Extinction Rebellion have announced that that last person has been arrested, essentially sacrificed for them and taken away. Now, I want to bring one of their spokespersons in, and someone who I've seen at these protests over the last week or so. Douglas, you've done a lot of organising here, and we just heard you then announcing that Oxford Circus is essentially over for you guys and you are moving on to Marble Arch where you can freely protest. Yeah, that's right. I mean, when I say it's over, I also mentioned that we're not going to stop until we've got climate justice, until we're living on a planet where my children can have a place to survive. You know, we're not going to stop until we've got what we need to get. For you, how important have the last 6 days holding essentially Oxford Circus been for you? This is a pivotal point in the city centre. Yeah, it's been amazing. I mean, I would say obviously it's only a quarter or a fifth of what we've been doing. It's one of 4/5 locations that we've had held, and they've all had their own resonances and their own importances. Oxford Circus, it's been amazing, I think, as an example of the joy and the kind of liberation that can come in coming together to make the world a better place. Douglas, we have seen a number of police officers here. They've been putting 1,000 out per day, and obviously today they've had special machinery to cut a lot of the protesters out. What would you say to the police who have essentially been working over the last 6 days tirelessly? We thank you, the police, for doing your duty and doing it in a way that is on the whole pretty peaceful, and on the whole they're not trying to spring things on us, they're not trying to second guess us too much. It's, you know, there are a lot of examples of, the UK is a very rare country, I think, in the world where the police are giving us our rights to protest. They're not carrying guns, they're not threatening us. So we appreciate that. We'd encourage them to support what we do, and when they talk to their families and their colleagues, to understand that we're doing this for the right reasons. Extinction Rebellion's process was to be here for 2 weeks. You've only been here for 6 days. I say only, it's still quite a long time. Have you failed, essentially? Do you think we've failed? Here I am on Sky News. No, we've done the opposite of fail. We are really doing well, I think. And here, yeah, no, we'll still be here next week. I mean, we might not be sitting in the middle of Oxford Circus, but I think you'll hear from us. Douglas, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Douglas from Extinction Rebellion, Isabel. But as you can see, we're just walking now slowly away from Oxford Circus towards Marble Arch, where protesters can protest freely. But here, the presence seems to be moving away from Oxford Circus, and I'm sure it'll be a relief for many people, including businesses in this area. But obviously, we will keep you up to date with what is happening here in Oxford Circus, and as we head towards Marble Arch.
OK, Inzamam, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's focus a little more on that police operation. In the last few moments, we've been speaking to the Met Police Commissioner, Cressida Dick. Let's have a listen to what she had to say.
It is a challenging week. It's the Easter weekend now, as you know. It's a hot weekend. There's a lot going on in London, right across London. And every day we've had over 1,000 officers. In fact, I think it's probably now over 1,500 officers working to police these protests. It's had an impact not just on the police, obviously, but on Londoners in general. Lots of people have had miserable disruption to their lives. And I've got one message for the protesters, and that is, please go to Marble Arch, where you can protest lawfully. Stop your unlawful protest. And if you don't want to go to Marble Arch, then go home.
How much sympathy do you have for businesses in the West End who, by the end of all of this, will have lost tens of millions of pounds in revenue?
I think all Londoners will have sympathy for those businesses. Some will be able to cope with the losses better than others, no doubt. But it is clear that by stopping, for example, Oxford Circus and stopping the through route up from Waterloo Bridge. It's affecting business in all kinds of ways, and people are losing money. It's also affecting people who want to get about London, whether that's for work or tourist reasons. It's affecting everybody in the area of the West End. And I've been walking about there today. I can assure you that many people are very fed up. They're coming up to me saying, these protesters don't realise the impact they're having on people like me.
Have you been stung by the criticism with people saying that this should have been dealt with on day one? Police should have just gone in and whatever number of arrests just kind of dealt with it because of the impact on the city, commuters, business and the international reputation, people looking in and seeing this day after day. Have you been stung by the criticism?
I'm very proud of what the Met have been doing. I'm very proud of the officers. We're extremely experienced in public order policing. We have fantastically experienced commanders. We have fantastically experienced people on the ground. We are world leaders in public order policing and in protest policing. The guys and girls have been working immensely hard. They have to work within the legal framework, and we have to have a proportionate response. I'm sure people sitting in their armchairs, on one side or other of the equation, may feel I'd have done it differently, but I can assure you they're thinking through all their decisions. The people on the front line are more scrutinised probably than any other profession in the world. They're having every single action filmed and scrutinised, and I think they're doing a fantastic job, and I'm really grateful to them.
What happens in the days to come? We've heard your message to the protesters to go to Marble Arch and protest where they were told to, peacefully and legally. How much longer will this last for?
Well, that's up to the protesters to some extent, isn't it? But we have already arrested over 700 people, I think heading for 750 people. We will continue to arrest people. We will continue to dismantle street furniture, take away things that they put in our way, continue to try to minimise disruption and get the roads moving and allow people to go about their lawful business. And we will continue to do that. We have shown that we are strong, we are determined. I've been a police officer for 36 years. I have never known a single operation in which over 700 people have been arrested. It shows we are determined and we will carry on.
Some reports that you've run out of cells, that you've run out of officers to arrest people because they're not cooperating, the members of the protests, and it's taking 4 officers to carry each person out when they're arrested. Just can we talk about resources and numbers? Have you run out of cells?
So what many of these protesters are doing, as you will have seen, is either gluing themselves or using very, very sophisticated mechanical contraptions to make it extremely hard for the officers to arrest them. They therefore have to spend quite a long time getting people free, using specialist equipment, specialist officers sometimes, getting the glue unglued, and then the people are refusing to walk, so they are being carried. I think it is frankly amazing, and I'm very proud of the fact that nobody has been injured, as far as I can see, in any of these arrests. But it does take 4 or 5 officers just to get somebody across to the van, and then they have to be transported to our cells. So that's resource intensive. But we have to do our job professionally, and we are doing it professionally. Once we're at the custody suites, of course there's a limited number of cells in London. We have a very good way of managing the flow around the custody suites. We've still got cell space available at the moment. If it comes to the point where we need to use cells in other parts of the country and the surrounding forces, then of course we would. And that's quite normal. Sometimes other forces put people in our cells.
Have you spoken to the Prime Minister about what's been going on?
I am not going to tell you who I have spoken to and who I haven't spoken to, but I can assure you I've spoken to many senior politicians, continue to do so. I've got an open line to both the Mayor and indeed to the Home Secretary. They're taking an interest. What happens, however, in terms of the operations on the ground remain entirely the responsibility of the Metropolitan Police, the British Transport Police, City of London Police and our partners, and we will direct how the protests are policed. The buck stops with me.
The protests haven't ended now, but will you be taking away learning from what's happened over the past few days in terms of this never happening again, London being effectively brought to a standstill?
So I think we should all pause. We always do after any large-scale or any small-scale, for that matter, operation. We will pause in the Met and have a good think about whether there's anything we could do differently, what we've learned from this. how we adapt our tactics. We will also be talking to the government and to our colleagues in the criminal justice system to see whether there are changes that should be made in the legal framework to make it easier for us to deal with people who are not violent but are refusing to move when it is unlawful for them to stay there protesting any longer. That is the dilemma, and if our powers are insufficient, if we don't have sufficient deterrence in the criminal justice system, then I will certainly be asking for changes. But I don't think now is the time to go into the detail of that. We obviously need to think about it.
Just looking ahead, next weekend the London Marathon takes place, a huge strain on police resources as well, so many visitors coming in, so many athletes.
Sure.
What happens if these protests are still ongoing and you've got a world-class event in the city taking up all of those resources as well? What's your message to the protesters looking forward to the next week?
Well, my message to the protesters thinking about Sunday, Marathon Sunday, is that I think a very, very large number of people right across the United Kingdom would be furious if the marathon was affected in terms of its safety and security or in any other way by protests like these. Suffice to say, the Metropolitan Police is a huge service. We are continuing to run our business. We're here where you can see the emergency calls are being answered. We're dealing with violent crime in all the boroughs. The officers are working extended hours in order to be able to make that happen. We will continue to adapt and to flex and continue, if we need to, with this operation policing protests. And if we need to ask for help from other forces, as we have done in the last couple of days, we will do so. As I say, I'm very proud of what we've achieved. Heathrow has not been disrupted. Over 700 people have been arrested. The officers have been extraordinarily professional, and we will go on doing that and trying to ensure that disruption to people in general going about their business in London is minimised as far as possible. The easiest way that can happen is if these protesters go to Marble Arch or go home.
So in all your...
There we go. That was the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Cressida Dick, talking to our correspondent, Enda Brady, saying that she really was urging Extinction Rebellion protesters to move on to Marble Arch or go home, and praising her team, saying that her police officers have been exceptional, and she was incredibly proud of the work they've done. Well, let's take a look at some of the day's other news now.